In this week's episode, I'm inviting Kevin Kepple, Transformational Leadership Coach, to the podcast. Kevin and I are chatting about how to bring out the best of your employees, how to turn sort of average employees into exceptional contributors with the help of the influence equation. We also talk about mindset shifts, transformational leadership, and a bunch of other really useful, interesting topics. I hope you enjoy this conversation and get to hear someone else on the podcast and share their perspective and experience as it comes to helping leaders in organizations become more impactful and influential. Let's go. Here's the question. How do you successfully transition into your first official leadership role, build the confidence and competence to lead your team successfully, and establish yourself as a respected and trusted leader across the organization? That's the question, and this show provides the answers. Welcome to the Manager Track podcast. I'm your host, Ramona Shaw, and I'm on a mission to create workplaces where work is not seen as a source of stress and dread, but as a source of contribution, connection, and fulfillment. And this transition starts with developing a new generation of leaders who know how to lead so everyone wins and grows. In this show, you learn how to think, communicate, and act as the confident and competent leader you know you can be. Welcome to this week's episode of the Manager Track podcast. Today, I have a guest with me. This is Kevin Kepple. Kevin teaches leaders to unlock their leadership code by leveraging their unique genius. As a Gallup-certified strength coach, Kevin has helped hundreds of leaders evolve to higher levels of excellence through his coaching. Kevin is a master coach and an expert at helping leaders become more without making them feel like less. He's also the host of the Unlock Your Freedom podcast. You can learn more about his work at kevinkepple.us, and we'll link to all that in the show notes. But without further ado, welcome, Kevin, to the podcast.
What's up, Ramona? Thanks for having me. What a great intro. Excited to be here with you.
Thanks for joining us. There's lots that we could talk about, but there are a few things that stood out to me as I was looking at your work specifically that I would love to bring into this conversation. Before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to be where you're at now and what inspired you to do this type of work?
Sure. So rewind a couple of decades and, I got into my first leadership position in my teenage years, and I had no idea what leadership was all about. My leadership example was a boss who screamed a lot, and he really liked profanities as adjectives, nouns, verbs, whatever. And he was very challenging to work for. And that was my first leadership experience because I was the assistant to, manager to that manager. And, that was the model. And I knew there had to be a better way. And I didn't know what it looked like. But, TV and old school leadership, right? It's like my way or the highway. And, I was really like a little bit dejected because I want to help people. And the last thing I want to do is belittle people and be hard on people and all that good stuff. So, went through college and I got my first job out of college, and it was the same thing. I had a boss who was abusive and kind of screamed. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to influence the behavior of others as a leader. And, thankfully my next boss after that was a little bit different, and it was a she this time. And she was more intentional about really seeing, what made you, you, and how you were special and how that special part of you could contribute to the whole. And, she was one of the first people I felt like that really gave me permission to be me. And, not that I needed it, but for some reason, I feel like a lot of people wait for that. And, it was really powerful to have somebody that I looked up to. I was like, hey, you know what? Like, you matter. You're special too. And you can do really cool things that, nobody else can do. And so keep going down the road. And I was working in a career that I was really good at, but I didn't have a lot of passion for. But I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't think that we were supposed to love what we do. I was like, you just do what you do for 30 or so years, and then you maybe get to retire if you're lucky and get the gold watch and all that. Mm-hmm. And then I was working with a business coach, and I was having success. I was working in sales, and I was winning the trips and getting to do all the cool stuff. And my business coach at the time, he's like, well, tell me what you love about your job. And I was like, well, I love this and I love that. And he's like, dude, I don't even think you like your job. It's like, what are you talking about? He's like, your like body language changed. You're like hiding from me when you're saying it. He's like, I don't think you're lying to me on purpose, but you're not being truthful. And I was like, wow, okay. Well, there's a couple of things that could be better, I suppose. And really I found out that I really like, helping people, transform towards whatever it is, they wanted to go out and create. I loved helping people be more without making them feel like less. And so, long story short, that was the beginning of my transformation towards becoming a business coach and a leadership educator. And that was, gosh, 15 years ago, I think. And I've been working in the business coaching space pretty much since then. And there's a little bit more to the story, but really, I think everything got better when I really understood, what my purpose was. And my purpose is, to help other people figure out, what their unique genius looks like and how they can align with that so they can really create their version of amazing.
Hmm.
And you know what? Like, it's really simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but you know what? It is so much fun to get to consistently see people, creating new beliefs about what's possible for them and what's possible in their lives.
Yeah, I love that. There are like two things that stood out to me right away. One is when we have bad leaders as role models, the disconnect, like just experiencing this sometimes can be, I think, can be really insightful. Not that I wish that ever, right, for anyone, but if for those of us who have gone through that experience, to look back and realize like, no, this is not the way to do this, because not only does it have a great impact, negative impact on the people they lead, but also their families and the people that they're touching, whether they're leading other people or just go home and then they're frustrated at home because of what they experienced at work. And I think that ripple effect and just noticing that and having gone through that experience is one of the things that I find personally too, is sort of igniting and reigniting that passion to do this type of work and helping leaders learn the skills and tools to lead well. Yeah, bring out other people's strength.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point because, like one of the bosses I had, I remember he was screaming at me one day and he's like, you're such a like petulant child. And he was screaming at me and like, I had to look up the word petulant at the time. I wasn't really sure what that meant. I'm like, hey, I was like, I feel like that's the kettle calling the pot black a little bit. But you know what? Like, I'm really grateful for him because he gave me a great contrast, right? This is what I don't want to be as a leader.
Yeah.
And, it's like hurt people hurt people. He was struggling too. So, God
Yeah.
bless him. Hopefully he got the help he needed. But that's definitely not the way that you're going to connect with people. And that's such a great word you use, Ramona, connection. Because if
Yeah.
we're not connected, like, then nobody's going to co-create our vision with us. I mean, they
Yeah.
may for a little while, but they're not going to do it happily. And they're definitely not going to bring their best, whatever that may be, if they don't feel connected to you or to the purpose or the vision that you're trying to share.
100%. Yeah. It's so true. And the other thing that you said that I thought was really interesting is how you were, probably rattling down things that you like about your job, because that you've probably said it many times before when people ask and you talk about it. And then your business coach picked up on the body language and the disconnect. And I think I want to point that I think this is the real power of coaching. Sometimes this is such a like intangible thing. So I'll just quickly call this out because no one really comes into conversations like a coach does with us. Like any friends that we have, that's not their job to call this out. They may not even notice it. They may not feel comfortable doing so. They maybe even shouldn't call it out in the moment. Who knows, right? But a coach really comes in, there's nothing at stake. The only thing that they want is for you to gain clarity or for you to get better. And that's it. And they have in the coaching engagement, they get to have this right or this privilege to be a mirror and call stuff like this out. That then makes us like stop and think. I think that's so powerful that like ignited that change for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Like when coaching is so powerful. There's never been a time when I've worked with a coach, either as an individual or as part of a mastermind group, that I haven't like massively transformed towards whatever it is I want. Like, because it just fast forwards a lot of the stuff that needs to happen for us to be successful.
Mhm.
And if I can get where I want to be in my 5-year plan in 6 months or 3 months, or why wouldn't I do it that way?
Yeah.
And, coaching is so cool because you have somebody who's completely unbiased. Their sole goal is to help you get whatever it is you say you want. Like,
Yeah.
that's a really cool thing when you can have a safe space like that with somebody you trust that can, like you said, mirror back to you what they're seeing. And some of the best coaching conversations I've had with clients are the ones where I said the least. They're like, man,
Yeah.
this was awesome. I'm like, well, cool. Like,
Yeah.
that's the whole point. It's not about me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Something that you talk about and ties into this is influence, right? So you talk about the influence equation. And the reason why this reminds me or ties into what we think about coaching is because sometimes as a coach, whether directly or indirectly, we're able to influence and influence in a way that it just inspires action or insights or gets other people to see alignment between what they're doing and what they actually want, or who they're being versus who they actually want to be, or how they want to be perceived. And as leaders who coach their team members, that's part of their job as well, right? To help them create that alignment and that level of clarity, and for them to see things that they may by themselves not able to identify or to clarify. But tell me a little more about what you mean when you talk about the influence equation and how that plays out for leaders.
Sure. I think it's pretty simple. And I feel like so many leaders get it backwards, and myself included in the past. And, to me, the influence equation is really three simple things: trust, connection, vision, and in that order. And most people, that are either new to leadership or maybe self-focused instead of externally focused, they start with vision. Like, hey, here's where we're going. Here's what we're doing. Go get it. And they expect people to like happily co-create that with them. And yeah, there may be some buy-in, but again, like that word connection, if you're not connected to the vision, then you're giving away so much power. And it all starts with trust. Like any powerful culture is built on trust, because if I trust you, that means I feel safe around you. And if I feel safe around you, that means I feel safe to be creative, because creativity is always risky because we're going into the unknown. And if I'm not creating, then I'm simply replicating whatever I see in front of me. And that's like compulsion and reaction and, all those like ego driven behaviors. And, if we're like reacting like that, we're just simply recycling the past more often than not. And, like yesterday was great, but I don't want to see yesterday again today. I want to see, what the next level evolved upwards is. And so it's really important that, we understand like trust comes from people feeling safe. And, there's a lot of different things that go into that, of course, but I think one of the biggest things is, like authenticity, being who you say you are and showing up when you say you're going to show up, and, being, fairly transparent. I mean, tell all your secrets, your personal stuff, but if I'm telling Ramona one message and then I go over to the next person on my team and give them kind of a different message that's not even in line with what I just said, then that is not authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
That just totally disconnects people from you. And so really, really important, you showing up for people when you say you're going to show up, showing up in the way you want to, be treated, that golden rule. And that really is cool because it allows people to be vulnerable. And, instead of just trying to be right, people can, try to be more, whatever their version of that looks like. And, connection is going to be constantly reinforced by, showing the people that you lead, hey, what's important to you is important to me. Because what are the questions everybody asks a leader? Number one, do you like me? Like if I feel like the leader doesn't like me, then I probably don't feel very safe. And then, the next one is like, can I trust you? And then that third one, it's like, can you help me get what I want? And, is what's important to me important to you? And, it's not like, yeah, the words are important, but really it's the actions. And as the leader, people are always watching you. And so it's crucial that, you're being the change you want to see, like Gandhi said. And,
Mm-hmm.
I have time to time, a client, and they'll, the people on my team are doing blank or they're not doing blank. And I'm like, cool. Are you doing this thing that you want them to do? They're like, well, no. Like, then how are you asking people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself? That doesn't mean you need to do everything necessarily, but you need to be willing to do it. Or if you're asking somebody to be a certain way, then you should probably be that way yourself.
So to recap this, because I think there's sort of the idea around influence and what you talk about, it boils down to, or what enables influence is the vision, the connection, and the trust. Or in the actual order, it starts with trust, connection, and then vision. And what I hear you say specifically is for someone listening who says, oh, okay, interesting. Am I doing this? The questions to consider here, or even the questions to bring up with employees directly, is first off, to figure out what's important to them. And sometimes we may assume or we have an idea, right? Whenever someone says, I think they do, I was like, hold on a second. You think or you know? Two different things. Have you talked about it? Are you making assumptions here? So to really know what's important to them, then to see like if, and it sounds like to contemplate for each team member, do I think they think I like them? A question that I like to ask even with that is, how much do you trust me? Or like if in a leader, how much do you trust me? And how much do you think I trust you? And I think that's really revealing. And it goes right into that. How much do you think I like you? And to contemplate that question. And then the third one was, can you help me? And in which ways would you help me? Do you have my back? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because all of that's going to go back to safety, right? Like if I feel like you
Yeah.
got my back, like then I feel safe and also feel connected to you.
Yeah.
And, like, are you going to take credit for the wins that I create?
Yeah.
Like, and that happens too. And, are you going to take credit for the losses, even though it's not your fault? Like that's some powerful leadership right there.
Yeah.
Like Jocko Willink, he's got that great book, Extreme Ownership. And I love that concept. It's like, hey, whatever happens on your team is a result of something you did or didn't do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're giving away all your power. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. Okay. You just made yourself a victim of your own team. And now your
Yeah.
team is the villain to your victim.
Yeah.
And that is a completely disempowered place. And, there's actually true, real victims in the world, and God bless them. And my heart goes out to them, prayers for you. But, in reality, most of us are only victims by choice. And, the alternative is like to be a hero or a guide, right? Like, either the guide, guiding other heroes, or being guided on your hero's journey. And, we vacillate between those roles, sometimes in the same conversation, even like, but, it's, man, like it's a choice to, like, do I want to choose love over fear? And
Yeah.
that's a skill that, we have to constantly develop, because if I'm trying to create from fear, there's no creation from fear. It's like that negative mindset will never create a positive life, like, period.
Yeah. And positive relationships, because that's where all the tension, the conflict, the friction, the lack of trust, all that comes from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I love that. And I love, so really those questions that you just highlighted to ask yourself as a leader, I think these are really, really powerful to think about for each and every person on the team, and with a lot of honesty, right? So being honest with yourself of not what you wish they would say, but really honestly what you think they might say. And then based on the insights that people get from asking themselves these questions about each team member, to then look at, how do I make some shifts? And I guess sometimes these are small shifts. So think about the question for you, Kevin. If you have someone that identifies, yeah, I have a couple team members and I think there's some friction or lack of trust that I have with them, what do you recommend them to do?
Talk to them. I mean, just, there's no point in, beating around the bush, and it doesn't need to be aggressive in any way. But like, let's say that you're the leader and you have two people that are not getting along on your team, perhaps. And I think that's what you said. And then maybe if you're not getting along with them too, like if it's two team members, like, man, the negotiation is one of the most powerful things you can do when you have a disagreement, is to get the two people in the disagreement together. Like, hey, what do we agree on? Like, what do we absolutely agree on? Because they agree on something. There's something that they can find agreement on. And then you work backwards from that. Okay, cool. We both agree on this. And then, reverse engineer. Okay, what about this? And then you can find the disconnect really quickly that way. And it's pretty powerful, because quite often, like, as you're doing that, like, people just want to be heard. Like, I don't always need the solution, and they'll get there themselves. And as they create their own solution, that's super powerful for you, the leader, because people will always support whatever they help create, and they help create that solution. So they're going to support it. But
Yeah.
if you go in there like, hey, you guys need to act right. Like, you be nice, you quit being mean. Like, okay, like that lasts for as long as you're in the room, probably, if that. But,
Yeah.
like, that's not sustainable. And, that's like, unless you're, that's transformational leadership right there, because you're helping people create insight, that sight from within. And unless I see things different fundamentally, we're habitual creatures and we revert back to what's familiar, even if we don't like what's familiar.
Yeah. Totally. And this idea of trying to have the solution in place and tell people what to do, I think often comes from a really good place. And I see this a lot with people who are new to leadership, that they're trying to be really supportive and they think that, well, now they're in that leadership role or manager role, and that's their job to solve and to provide solutions and answers to things and give direction, that's actually the job. And so it comes from really good intention. But, we then we'll see the side effect or what happens down the road when this is like that one way directive kind of leadership versus allowing other people to create or co-create solutions And the leader doesn't have to be the one doing that. The leader has to be the one who's addressing it, creating the space, having the conversations, providing that insight or sparking the insight, but then kind of letting go on that second part and let them own the problem and the solution.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's so powerful. Like that is a really good advice she just gave you guys. I would absolutely go back and listen to that again if you didn't catch what she said, because new leaders all make the same mistake. And I did too when I was a new leader. We tell people what to do.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know about you, but I don't like being told what to do. You know, that's force. I do not like being controlled like that, but I love to serve. And if you just ask me, all you gotta do is put a question mark on the end of it. Right. And I love to serve. And, you know, like if you're solving all the problems for the people on your team as a leader, like that's really dangerous and disempowering for the team, because number one, I have to be around all the time to solve all your problems if I solve all your problems. And like, what am I learning if you're solving all my problems? But if you can, you know, help me learn how to solve my own problems, like that's some powerful empowerment right there, because then you don't have to be around to solve all the problems. And that's how you scale yourself as a leader. You know, like being a leader isn't, you know, about telling people what to do at all. It's about inspiring and empowering people, you know, because inspiration, that's stimulating to action. And then, you know, like empowerment is, you know, giving them the knowledge of the tools to know what to do with that stimulation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that idea of being a leader isn't about telling people what to do. That is so important, like bolding, highlighting, and it changes the perspective, or it's a real shift inside, right? And how we see ourselves as leaders. And I think that's where part of the transformation comes from. So speaking about transformational leadership, that's another thing that you talk about a lot. What do you specifically mean when you think about transformational leadership? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. That's a great question. And I kind of touched on it a second ago, but really like with leadership, it's similar to coaching. You know, there's kind of 3 levels, right? And when it comes to, you know, pouring into others, and that level 1 is like, let's say that you have somebody on your team that just doesn't listen to other people when they talk, and all they do is kind of talk over people, and they're just not a good listener. And so they need to be better at listening, obviously. And so you help them with like a tactic, like, hey, you know, like there's a great quote from Abraham Lincoln that says, you know, I'd rather keep my mouth shut and let people think I'm an idiot than open my mouth and prove it, you know, and then helping them understand why that's not a good thing, and how they could, you know, hey, maybe count to 5 before you start talking to give people a chance, you know, when they're pausing because they maybe aren't done talking, or whatever the case may be. That's level 1. Level 2 is maybe they're just not good at relationships in general. Like, you know, they just like cause friction with everybody in the office, and, you know, nobody wants to be around when they're around because they're just hard to work with. So they need to get better at relationships in general. And so they need more of a strategy than just a tactic. They're like, hey, you know, helping them understand like what a good teammate looks like. You know, what kind of person do you want to be in the room with, and on and on and on. Then level 3, like, and both those are good and appropriate in certain situations. But level 3, that transformational change, that's when you help people like, you know, see the fundamental truth about life differently, right? Like you help people create a new perspective by helping them, you know, create some sort of an insight from within, right? Insight. And that's so crucial, because unless I see it differently fundamentally, the behavior doesn't change lastingly, because we're such habitual creatures. Like we cling to the known. And I'm sure you've seen this with so many coaching clients that you've worked with. They cling to this known reality that they don't even want in spite of the unknown, because in their minds, the unknown is scary. And, you know, like, man, I would not be scared of the unknown. I would be terrified of staying in the known, because you're going to like outdate yourself. The people who stay the same, like personal inflation eats you up, because the world continues to revolve around you, just not in the way you want it to revolve around you. And so, you know, you're this old, outdated version of you, and everybody else is moving forward. And so it's crucial. And you don't always need somebody else to create that, you know, transformational, you know, leadership coaching. You can do that with self-coaching or self-leadership. It's just like, hey, like, you know, like, what am I not seeing accurately here? Where can I make a new decision? And, you know, like that's the one thing that holds so many people back. It's like they just don't make new decisions. Like, well, I've always been this way. She's always been this way. Well, change it if you don't like it, right?
Totally. I have like a no label rule in all my group coachings or groups that I coach. Like we're not allowed to have any labels.
I think that's great.
Like I'm a control freak. They're like, no, not allowed. Do not label yourself a control freak.
Yeah. In the past.
In the past, yes. We're learning. Can you share a couple of, or a example of a situation where someone that you coached has gone through an experience where an insight really led to that transformation?
Absolutely. Like pick a favorite kid here. Like there's a couple, so many. So one of the gentlemen I'm lucky enough to work with, he's a CEO of a company of about 250, I think, and they do about 20 million in revenue a year. So great company he's running. And are you familiar with Clifton Strengths Assessment or Strength Finders? Have you ever heard of that? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so, but tell the audience a little bit more about it if that's relevant.
Sure. So Strength Finders, AKA Clifton Strengths Assessment, same assessment. They just rebranded it a couple of years ago. I'm not sure why, but they did. Anyway, they didn't ask for my input. But what it does, it identifies your natural talents. Not a complete portrait of your character, but it's like, hey, here's your natural talents. And if you develop these, it can be your superpowers or your strengths. And so the gentleman I was talking about, the CEO, his number one strength is competition. And there's a thought called the balcony in the basement. The basement's basically when you're making it all about you with your strengths and you kind of go to war with yourself, the ego's involved and you're trying to create from fear. And then, so obviously that's not a good place to be. And then the balcony is when you're using your strengths in a positive and productive way. So competition in the basement is all about me winning. And I don't care whose throat I have to step on to win. And if I don't think I can win, I probably just won't even do it. And, that was me in my 20s, 15 to 30, pretty much.
I'm laughing. I'm like, yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. Most people with competition can. And so in the balcony, though, the very healthy version is like, it's not about me winning, it's about us winning. Like, how can we win? And, super powerful strength. And so this gentleman has competition at number one. And he's got significance right up there, really high too. And significance in the basement is like, hey, the me monster. It's like, hey, it's all about me, my, I. Have I told you about me? It's my favorite subject. Let me tell you a little more about me. In the balcony, it's like, I want to create massive transformation in these people, in this company. I want to do something big. I want to transform the world. I want to make a dent in the universe, like Steve Jobs said at Apple. And so what we simply did is like helping him see like, hey, these are the things you told me you wanted. This is where you want to go with your company. This is where you want to go personally. And when you show up like this in the basement, you're completely derailing all of the plans you have. You're making it harder on the people you work with. You're making it harder on yourself, and you're stealing from your family because you're taking away your time that could be spent with them because you're so intentional about being here and winning all the time. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't much more complicated than that, but a couple conversations and really getting him to see like, hey, this is what it looks like when you show up in the basement. And this is what it looks like when you show up in the balcony. And like, it's amazing the transformation he's made. He's so much happier. He's so much healthier. He's lost like a tremendous amount of weight, and the performance of the company dramatically went up. I actually coach a bunch of his leaders too in his company. And I've heard it so many different times. And so does the coach who works with me. She's like, man, they say this all the time. Like, I don't know what you did to him, but we love it. Thank you for doing that because he's such a better version of him. Like, he did all the work. I just showed him a better way. And, it's about choosing love over fear as a skill. Because, pretty much every decision we've ever made was motivated by one of those two things, right? Like it's either fear or love. If you boil it down, because, fear can wear lots of hats, right? Like anger, guilt, shame, pride, all of that, but that's fear-based. And so I'm never going to get where I want to go if I don't start with the right information. And you said something earlier that was so brilliant. It's like, it's not like we got to go change everything about you. We didn't give him a lobotomy, right? Like if they still do that, but it's like these tiny little tweaks in your approach can lead to a massive difference on the back end.
Yeah, totally. What a great example. And I loved your analogy of the basement and the balcony, because like you say, sometimes this is the thing, this is the strength, like in this case, competition. And we don't have to change anything about that. It's just changing the way that we see this. And this is the transformation that you're referring to. In one way, I could leverage that strength and get satisfaction from it by making it about me, or I can realize like, oh no, I can scale that and making about us. And then the way I lead and the way I have conversations and the way I empower my team, that all has it's like a wave with the ripple effect that goes through the entire organization just from shifting how we're thinking about ourselves and what we're trying to create.
It's so powerful because everybody catches on, and the people that doesn't resonate with, they go away. And not that they're bad people, but they just weren't ready to row in that direction.
Yeah, totally. Or wasn't the right direction in the first place. And that's good. That's fine as well. Totally. So as we're sort of wrapping up the conversation, I have two short questions. One would be, what's one specific question that you recommend everyone listening to contemplate about or think about?
Wow. Well, there's one I'm always asking myself. It's like, what's for dinner? But that's probably not relevant. How about this? Am I being intentional about being kind as opposed to right?
Yeah. So good. Am I being
And
intentional versus being right?
yeah, kind as opposed to right. I've
Yeah.
never walked away from anybody who's right all the time and been like, man, they're awesome. She was right about everything, but I have walked away from people, like Ramona. I'm like, man, she's really kind and
Yeah.
brilliant and really humble. And that's really cool. That's the kind of people I want to be around.
That's a great question to contemplate. And that's one that I think just reflecting on the day, right? Some of those questions really help us become a better leader because we're developing this awareness of how we're showing up by asking ourselves this one question every day or a few questions every day. Did I
Yeah.
use my time right? Was I present? Just a couple of questions I ask myself, like was I trying to be right or was I trying to be kind and connected and create trust? Awesome. What's a specific small action that you recommend every listener to take? Something that could be done within a day or a week from listening to this.
Well, one thing that we could all do that will change our lives for the better is stop having an opinion about everything. Stop having an opinion about other people's opinions. Stop having an opinion about your opinions. It's like you don't have to believe everything you think. Sometimes it's just a thought. And, to go further, you don't have to believe everything other people think. Just
Yeah.
because it's a thought doesn't make it true. The mind's very powerful for sure, but it's a fraction of our being. But if I believe everything that it tells me, then it becomes my whole entire being.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, again, the mind's super powerful, but I don't use it all the time, right? Like
Yeah.
2 legs, I don't use those all day long just because they're super powerful. I don't like, kicking the desk. Like, got to do something with these things.
I love that with the legs. We don't use them all the time. So true. Someone recently said, like, every time not every thought needs to turn into a story and write a chapter in your book. Like the idea of it's just a thought. We have a lot of thoughts and most of them are totally made up, right? And are worries that will never actually become real. They're all thoughts that come from places, who knows where. We just let them go. We don't need to make any stories out of them. They don't need to write a chapter. They don't need to be taken as for granted and as reality. So true. Really good one. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your work that you do. And I hope that through, sometimes just sharing examples of what other leaders go through and the shifts that they're making and how these small behavioral shifts, we're all on this journey all the time because the environment changes, the responsibilities change, there's new challenges. And so for us to grow and continuously improve and try to bring up the best in us, that requires this ongoing reflection, the looking for insights and ways to learn from our own mistakes and learn from others as well. So thank you so much for sharing and bringing this into this podcast episode.
Yeah,
it's great having you on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time to share with me. And I really grateful that people like you are doing things like this to help the leaders that are out there, because there's a lot of information, but there's it's good to have somebody coming from that place of love, looking to really create more powerful people in the world so we can do more good work. And so I would strongly urge all you guys listening, if you hadn't checked out Ramona and what she offers, to definitely do that, because she'll take you anywhere you want to go.
Oh, thank you. What a humble way to end the podcast, and vice versa. Thanks for the work that you do. And do check out Kevin, especially if you're looking for, really that self-reflection, looking at strength. And I think you do a lot of work with Strength Finder. You want to learn more about your personal strength and your leadership and looking at ways that this could transform your team. Check out Kevin at kevinkepple.us. And I suppose you're on social media as well. What's the best platform to connect with you?
Instagram or LinkedIn. It's Kevin Kepple on both. So
okay, and then check out his podcast too. That's the way to go. All that will be linked in the show notes. Thank you, Kevin, for being on the show.
Thanks, Ramona.
If you love this show, then you love even more my free training for new managers. If you haven't watched this training yet, then I'll strongly encourage you to sign up at ramonashaw.com/masterclass. You'll discover the key shifts you'll need to make as a new manager and the #1 most common mistake to avoid. Plus, you'll walk away with actionable tips that you can apply in your role right away. Go to ramonashaw.com/masterclass to sign up.